Hello, and welcome to Parsley and Sage, the gardening podcast to grow by. I'm Pam Pooley.
And I'm Jean Farewell.
And we're here to share what we've learned from digging and designing,
weeding and planting,
watering,
feeding,
figuring,
finessing,
loving the land,
and all things green.
So let's grow.
In today's episode, we will focus on focal points. We call them focal points. The English call them eye catchers. An eye catcher could be a bird bath, a statue, a bench, or any number of constructed or natural elements. They anchor a space and direct the eye, and many offer year-round interest.
Absolutely. I was thinking even a large urn filled with flowers can serve as a great eye catcher, and you can style it for the season, filling it with evergreens or berry branches in the winter months. And I even have a potting bench on my patio that I decorate in the summertime with lots of colorful annuals in different size pots. And it's really lovely to add so much color to the grays of the patio. And, it made me think of also, I have a friend that bought a house recently with a barn. And in the barn, she found this old cast iron bathtub. And she brought it out onto the property with some strong arm help, and then filled it with a lot of plants and mostly annuals, so she could redecorate it, so to speak, every year. But it's so creative, and that's quite a focal point, as you can imagine.
Oh yes, that sounds great. Color is really effective as a focal point. Mm-hmm. We put a red door in our stone wall. It matches the red of our front door. And people automatically head for the red door. So a doorway or a gate attracts interest because people want to see what is on the other side. So arches that are cut through hedge walls or moon gates. Moon gates are full-size doors in the garden, but the upper half is cut out with a circle, so you can peer through it. And they're great. They encourage people to circulate around your garden because people want to peer through. So, Pam, tell me, do you have some eye catchers that you particularly like?
Well, I like the ideas you just mentioned. I do have more than I think, come to think of it. We have a dwarf weeping beech tree that we set alone in a field. It was given to us as a memorial tree for a deceased relative. And last season, we set a cement bench beside it. And it is a lovely tableau. So you can kind of create these scenes, and it really is eye-catching. For that matter, even adding a hammock under a stand of trees can carry the eye. We had a friend come over once and looked at our apple orchard and said, "Boy, I'd love to lie under there." And I, in fact, then added a hammock, and your eye goes right to it.
Yes, and I'm sure you go right to it for the very nice rest. That sounds lovely to have a hammock in an orchard. There are all sorts of statues and sculptures for every taste, but one has to factor in style. So, for example, a weathered bird bath ornamented with carvings would better fit an older home than a bird bath with clean lines and lack of ornamentation. And a classical statue lends itself to an older garden, while an abstract sculpture suits a modern home.
This is true, but breaking the rules can make for some creative surprises. We have an old home, but I found this colorful, contemporary-looking bird bath that says on it, "Gather friends," and it really brightens up my shade garden.
Oh, that's nice. I hope the birds can read. Yeah, whimsy can be fun. You can stuff clothes with straw to make scarecrow characters. You can repurpose pipes and machine parts to create steampunk figures or sculptures. Rusty old farm tools and machines are interesting. I have a weathered antique wagon with rusty wheels that can be filled with flower pots or flowers or pumpkins, depending on the season.
Oh, that's really fun. That's a neat idea. I have a colorful metal rooster. It's about 3 feet tall. It's pretty funky and whimsical, actually, and it makes me think, though, the scale really is a consideration. You don't want your delightful piece to be lost in the landscape, and I keep moving this rooster around because it does tend to get lost.
Oh, Yes, and if you're putting a statue at the end of a long path to break the monotony of the path, then the statue has to be large. You can put it on a plinth to make it more imposing, but the object definitely has to be scaled to the space. I've seen small stones stacked up like cairns as a wonderful focal point, or setting your statue or still life, say, on a circle of pavers helps draw the eye as well.
Oh, good idea.
Yeah, and that organizes the space. But some eye catchers are hidden, like in a circle of tall hedges. And these kinds of enclosures create a sense of mystery. And people can be drawn to them, not only because they want to follow a curving path and see where it goes, but by the fragrance of flowers maybe, or the sound of splashing water. When people hear the trickle of water from a fountain, they want to see that fountain.
That's really interesting. It just shows how much curating you can put into a garden, really, with sound and smell. We do have a water feature, in fact, also on our patio. It's very small. It's probably about 4 feet by 4 feet, and it was built into the corner when we were having the sitting wall built. We thought this was an opportunity because we were digging and we had opportunity to set up an electrical line. It has a pump that serves to recirculate the water, and it's just a little sound of water running, trickling down the rocks, and now the rocks have become mossy. And I put a very small figurine of a seated goddess on one of the stones, and it's just really lovely. I find it so peaceful to hear the water, and of course it is certainly a focal point when you step onto the patio. And then interesting that you mentioned the water feature that sometimes you can just take for granted. I was at a house yesterday where the owner had built a little waterfall leading into a very small koi pond, and it was right near the house, and that makes me think, Jean, I think that having water near an outdoor entertaining space can be really, really nice, so that people can take part in, hearing it.
Oh yeah, you want access to it as much as possible.
Yeah, and this makes me think about something that is kind of a tradition in Europe, which is a little different, that you put in the distance. They're buildings that can just serve as eye catchers. They're called follies, and it may be a gazebo of some type where people can go to sit and have a glass of iced tea, or it will just frame a vista. Usually on large properties, they create a destination for visitors.
Yes, I've seen some follies in England, and some of them are Greek temples.
Yes.
They're ruins of abbeys. I mean, they're really monumental.
Yes.
So if you want to go down that road, be prepared to pay large sums.
That's true. That's really true. I think that focal points don't necessarily have to be constructed of man-made materials. As I mentioned, the little tree we had is the memorial. A beautifully proportioned tree standing by itself certainly can be a focal point, especially if you underplant it with a circle of flowers for foliage.
Oh yes, I love that look. And if you have large boulders on your property, they can be featured as focal points. You can plant alpine flowers and ground covers on them. I myself like decayed and desiccated wood that I find in the forest, gnarled old branches that look like driftwood and that sort of thing. They're full of character and they create interesting accents.
How do you use them in the garden?
I'll just put them on a wall, or if I have a bed of low plants, I'll drop one in the bed of plants.
Oh, that's interesting. Yes, I know of someone who has saved all his stumps, and he has them pulled out of the ground. We've talked about this once in an episode, to create a stumpery. It's very dramatic because you turn the root ball upside down, so it is the feature, and it's very dramatic in a garden bed, and it does take up some space too, which is also something to consider, because the more flowers and shrubs you have, of course, calls for more maintenance. But when you have some of these focal points to take up some space, it's very useful.
That's true. Some gardens have topiaries, animals and that sort of thing. And I've seen a huge topiary in the shape of a teapot, which I loved, and I would love to see it on my own property. It was so charming, but what a task.
Yes.
Snipping these things into the shapes of creatures and teapots.
Absolutely. What skill that takes. I mean, I don't see that much here. What kind of shrubbery is used for topiaries usually?
Well, it's usually yew or boxwood.
Okay.
I'm not sure any deciduous plants would work.
Do you think that you could do it yourself?
I highly doubt it. I think it's the sort of thing that takes training. I think you have to apprentice. I would love to learn it, but the sort of topiary I would want would have to rival some of the great ones I've seen, because those are the ones I like.
Yes, true.
Takes great skill. Well, I can't emphasize enough the value of designing with features that draw the eye. There's an area of my property, it was nothing more than plants adjacent to the forest, and you wouldn't take notice of it at all. But then I added a bird bath, and suddenly I had a vignette, like a stage set. The whole space seemed to hang together.
Oh, that's so interesting. And on that note, a bird bath, a bird feeder. We have a bluebird feeder, in fact, that's such a focal point. Of course, we watch the little bluebird family nesting there. And that's a very good point. It can be very simple. You don't really have to do too much just to create a focal point. And that idea, Jean, is really significant, to think about your garden as stage sets. The garden can have different tableaus to direct the viewer's eyes, and you can set them to what you want to see, and alternatively, you can actually hide and distract from things you may not want them to see.
An important consideration. Well, thank you, Pam.
Thank you, Jean. This is very interesting.
That wraps up today's garden conversation. We would like to answer your gardening questions on the show. So please message us on Instagram at Parsley and Sage Podcast, or visit our website at parsleyandsagepodcast.com. Thank you for joining us. I'm Pam Pooley.
And I'm Jean Farewell for Parsley and Sage. Happy digging.